This episode is a huge episode in the van build. Today I'm installing the electrical system. It's about 28 degrees, 11 o'clock in the morning, incredibly hot. Good day to do it. It's going to get sweaty though. I'm going to break this episode up into two parts. The first part, I'm going to take you through the type of electrical system that I've opted for and why I've changed my mind. My initial plan was going to be something else. However, last minute, I've decided to change my mind and go for a different system. And then in the second part of this episode, I'm going to go through the actual install of the system. I'm hoping that some of the reasons that I've chosen the specific system that I'm going to use resonate with you, and you might find some sort of common ground and a reasoning behind why I'm choosing this one. It should be a good install. I'm looking forward to this. And I think once it's done, a huge step complete. From there, I'll be able to start actually building out the aesthetics, the cabinets, what it looks like, and we'll be able to get the hot water system in as well, which is quite exciting. The system I am going with is the EcoFlow Delta 2 Max and the 800 watt alternator charger. So my original plan was to go with a Renogy system, like a full individual battery, individual DC to DC alternator, solar charger, all the fuses, all the cables, all the switches. I changed my mind after reading some reviews on online and on Reddit as well, and seeing some TikToks and comments about people's experience with Renogy. Obviously some were positive, but a lot of them were actually negative. So decided not to go with that option. That system, the full setup that I was looking at, would be about 1.8 grand roughly. So that included things like fixed solar panels on the roof, included a 350 megawatt battery. I'll bring the stuff that I was going to buy up on the screen on the left or the right, so you can see what I was originally going to go for. Yeah, a whole host of things to buy for that system. Now, kind of frustratingly, I did actually buy some of that stuff, specifically all the auxiliary things, not the Renogy stuff itself, but all the cables, the mega fuses, things like the battery switches, the on and off battery switches, the solar unit, or the solar DC isolator, things like the mega fuse holders, and the positive and negative bus bars, plus about 4 meters of positive and negative cabling as well. Now, after actually looking at the Renogy stuff, and I mean, it looks good. They advertise it well. The products look very nice. I saw that the customer service apparently wasn't as good, and the reliability of the products hit and miss. Again, I've never used this stuff, so I don't actually know what it's like, purely just going off reviews online. So that left me with the dilemma. Do I go for the kind of full Victron system? What I wanted would have probably cost about maybe 2.5 grand. That's fine. It's, like a reusable product. If I want to get rid of the van, I could take that system out, use it elsewhere. Or do I go for an alternative? Obviously everyone uses Victron. I am absolutely not opposed to it. Probably need a little bit more space for that full system. It would have taken up more space in the cabinet because there's a lot of components to put together. And again, I'm not opposed to putting them together. I was actually quite looking forward to doing all that electronic setup. I do like doing things a little bit differently. I've done this van a bit differently. Very kind of unique, I think, install and build. So I think it deserves something a little bit more unique in terms of the actual electronic system. So the Delta 2 Pro Max by EcoFlow is what I opted for. It weighs about 25 kilos. It's heavy. It is, I'll put some of the stats on the screen, but it's like a battery and an inverter at the same time. So it puts out AC power, 12 volts, 10 amp power through there. You've got 2 3 amp DC ports as well. I forget what they're called. There's a specific name for that type of port. I'll put that on the screen as well. In the front, it's got the USB-A and USB fast charging ports, just normal USB ports, and then two USB-C 100 watts, 5 amp each DC ports. It can be charged by solar and it can be charged by the car using the 800 watt alternator charger, which I picked up as well. The other thing I've opted not to do just yet is to put a fixed solar panel on the roof. I'm going to decide what to do here. Most likely option, I'm going to get the EcoFlow 400 watt fold up solar panel. Comes in like a nice little briefcase thing, because I think the only time I'm really going to use solar will be on road trips, holidays, and at campsites. On those, I can unfold the solar and put it out on the ground or put it on the roof of the van itself, just laying flat. I think this should help. If I do that option, it will help keep the van a bit more stealthy for when I want to use it in London, because it won't have a roof rack or a fixed solar panel on the roof. So that does mean I'll be a bit more reliant on the alternator charger. So I got the more powerful alternator charger, the 800 watt versus the 500 watt alternator charger. So when I'm driving to London or driving around London, charging the battery of the unit itself, of course I can just pre-charge it at home. It takes about an hour to charge with a wall socket. Really the main reasons why I chose this. Firstly, I like the idea of having a unit that was removable from the van and usable somewhere else. You can actually essentially power houses with this, or with combinations, multiples of these that you link together. We do go camping. We've got a really nice Bell TP tent, quite a big one, 5 meters, and I could take the truck, take this, take the Bell tent, and we've got electricity in the tent. Second reason, I do live in the Lake District, pretty much in the middle of nowhere, and we do get some power outages here. Typically in the winter, if there's storms and thunder and things, it can bring down pylons. So having a battery system that can just remain charged, and if we get a power outage, I can bring this inside, I can connect the Starlink internet up to it, connect some lights up to it, and we've still got power for the next couple of days. Or even connect the fridge up to this. You can run a fridge for a day, like a large home fridge. And then kind of like the third reason tied into that, I'm into the whole, like prepping thing, at least the UK version of the prepping side of things. And this is a great thing to have for that. Similarly, for a power outage, you just, you've got backup energy basically. I think that combined with a removable solar system that I can use out in the garden, for example, is pretty handy. So what am I going to do now? I'm going to install this. I'm going to use some of the auxiliary stuff that I did buy and still put that in place. So the first one I'm going to use, I'm definitely going to put the DC to DC solar isolator in place, because I've wired the solar panel wires through the roof and out through the grommet in the ceiling. That's all in place. So if I do want to put a solar panel in there, I can. I'm going to wire this inside, get the cables wired up, and have this end clear, empty, so that I can just plug this into the Delta 2 Max and charge it by solar from the roof if I want to. Whether I put the removable panels up or permanent ones up, it will be there. Now the second thing I'm going to do is use the DC fuse blocks, because obviously all the stuff that I put in the van is DC, and this primarily kicks out AC current. However, there are DC plugs, as I mentioned. I'm going to have to kind of rewire those DC plugs to make them work for the fuse blocks. So let's dive into the install. I'm going to show you all the components for the system and we'll get started. So starting with the things that you're going to see on the install, we've got the 800 watt alternator charger, got a port for connecting to the battery, and we've got a port for connecting to the EcoFlow battery itself. Next to that, solar DC isolator. It's essentially the on and off switch for allowing the power to come through from the solar panels in the roof. Got two DC fuse blocks, and then I thought these are quite cool, two DC rocker switches allowing me to turn off the fuse blocks. Those are 25 amp each, I think, rated to 25 amps, so plenty of ampage for each block. In this cabinet, we've got some of the cabling. So I've got this cable here to convert the DC car charger into a usable source of power. This just spits out bare wire, positive and negative DC energy rated up to 10 amps. So that is going to go for this larger fuse block here. Then I have bought these two USB-C to DC plug port cables. What I'm going to be doing is chopping the end off the DC port, which will reveal two wires, the positive and negative bare wires. This end is the USB-C charging cable. Then lastly, these are the cables for the alternator charger to connect it to the battery with this fuse block, 125 amp built-in fuse into there, and then the cable essentially to attach it to the battery and then into the alternator charger. We're going to have to mount these onto a board, so I think that's probably going to be the first thing. We'll cut out a board, maybe fabric back it with car carpet, ready to screw these in place. We'll drill some holes through, poke all the wires through, make it look nice and neat. First step complete. We've put together the board. You can see the holes with the light in the background. That's to feed the wires through. Yeah, we're looking good. To install the solar isolator, you just unscrew the cover, take it off, and there are in the back 4 points where you can drill some holes. So I'll just send a drill through those, open it up, and then we'll get the screws and pop them in, screw it onto the board. Attaching the alternator charger looks pretty straightforward. It comes with this little bracket, and that will get bolted onto the back like that, and then we'll just screw that into the wood. Should be pretty straightforward. Use these little black screws to bolt it in. That is the base of the panel complete. You can see all the components now attached on. Doesn't quite look as neat as I wanted it to, because I've got these like silver screws in now, because I forgot to install kind of a spacer for the rear, so that I've got something to attach it to the wood itself, to allow the cables behind to, you know, have space. So I'll be putting brackets on these bits of wood and attaching that to the wall. However, obviously I forgot to put those on before I carpeted it, so lesson learned. If I was doing it again, do that first, otherwise you end up with screws kind of through your carpet, so it doesn't look as neat. I'm going to prepare the battery cable that's going to come into the alternator charger. So first going to need to drill a hole down in the bottom corner through the bulkhead to where the battery is. Then we can feed the cable through and get it connected in. So So what I've done on the battery side, I've moved the chair forwards and just unscrewed the live connection and the negative connection, so we've got no power going through the cables. Now you can see this screw here. This is the one that you want to attach the positive battery cable to, and then likewise there is the negative one. I've already taken that screw off. Yeah, so what we'll do, on the battery end we've got this fuse cable that's going to get attached there, and then into this end is going the positive end of the alternator cable, and then for the negative it's just the negative end of the alternator cable is getting wired onto there. The cables are now screwed and bolted in. I've, for now, cable tied them to the seat just so they don't move. I don't think they're going to rub against this metal because they're kind of laying flat against the metal, not at an angle. And then we've got the cable running through there. So fuses in place, positive, negative, they come together and run through the wall. Next up is the solar wiring. Now, to identify positives and negatives, we do have on the solar isolator a little positive and a little negative sign for the inputs. So the cables that go with these are this, you would call it a male adapter, however, because it looks, you know, male, pointy. It's actually got a hole for it, so that is a female inside, a female connector inside the male adapter. The male adapter plugs into there. Obviously the wire is going in the top there. Now the male socket takes the female adapter that has the male, don't know if you can see that in there, the male connector, and so that pops in on there, and then the wire obviously through the top. So the female connector with the male adapter is the positive, and then the female adapter with the male connector is the negative. Now for this I do have a fuse as well, that goes in the positive end, so I'm going to plug that in the kind of halfway down the wire, wire that into there, so this acts essentially like, you know, it almost go into there, but obviously it's going to be behind the board in the wire. So we've got the two solar wires down there. Let's get a closer look, I'll show you what I mean. So where things start to get a little tight, but we'll make do. So I've got my two solar photovoltaic wires. They're already wired through the roof with the connections on the outside. We've got a negative and a positive. I'm going to start with the positive. That's where I'm going to need my fuse to go into. So what I'll do, I'll cut the section here and we'll pop the fuse in, kind of in there. We'll crimp it all in, and then we'll wire this connector onto the end of the positive there, and so that'll be all ready to go. That obviously goes into the female connector on the actual distribution switch. Popped a bit of red heat shrink. I'm not heating it up, but just identify it as the positive wire in the future, in case I forget or something. So opening up the connector, got this little rubber grommet. So push that through the wire. So it's in place for later when we screw it on. This is the inside of the connector. You see the female adapter or female connector. So we just got to crimp that around the bare wire. So I just need to cut away the rubber, and then we'll get that crimped onto the end. Pick up the female connector with the the male connector with the female adapter. So that's nearly there. Male body with the female connector fuse in place, the inline fuse attached to the same male connector female inner, which is the positive, noted by the red heat shrink tape. And the second wire is our female body with the male inner. What I need to do now is create a second, I guess, male adapter with this cable and female adapter as well. So the spare bit of cable that I just cut off, I've got to wire one end the female so it can plug into the fuse, and then the other end is going to be the male here, which is essentially just repeating. We're just extending this wire basically, so it will fit around the corner, through the wood, through the hole, and into the actual isolator switch. Much easier doing this wiring not inside the cupboard. I can actually move around and sit up. So I've got that extension wire complete, both ends. That'll fit nicely in with the fuse. Let's get that plugged in. So that's the fuse extension wire plugged in, male body with the female inner, and the female body with the male inner. Good to go, positive and negative. Next up, it's time to wire the ends of some of my adapters. So let's try the USB-C one first. I'm going to cut off this DC end and expose the bare wires, and then we'll see what we're going to do from there. Okay, I've run into a problem. The bare wires on the end of the USB-C cable are not traditional positive and negative. There's an inner core in the white sheath, and it's surrounded by an external, amount of wiring that's kind of surrounding that inner core. So it doesn't look like I'm going to be able to do and use this for converting the USB-C into DC power, positive and negative. That is a pain. I'll work out that later. Easy one to do is the car charger. That's going to be powering the main stuff like the lights and the fridge and the pump, so no problem there. So I just need to take the ends off these and basically extend the wires using some of the connectors I've got, so it reaches the actual fuse board, because at the moment obviously that's very short, it's not going to reach. Pretty simple job. Straightforward job really. We're using those grey clippy connectors, as I call them, clipped onto the end of the wire, and then the matching wires just associate and clip on there, and this other end that's connected into the actual DC fuse box. To make my life a little bit easier, I am going to install this straight into the panel now, because this end is just going to be loose until it gets plugged into there, so that's absolutely fine. So we've got the negative, positive, they're going to be sent through there, and then once we're through, we'll be crimping on the ends with a bit of heat shrink, ready to attach on. Something I almost forgot to do was actually wire the switches for the DC fuse boards. All it takes is just to split the power wire into two and wire them into these connectors that came with the switch itself. I don't know which one's positive, I don't know which one is on and off, so I will just flip them if the switch is the opposite of what I want it to be. For the second switch, because the 5 amp USB cable isn't what I need, I'm not going to be able to wire this fuse board just yet, so I've kind of pre-wired what I need to, and then in these ends that's where we'll be wiring in the USB cable adapter thing that I need to order. Next up, I'm going to do the ceiling lights. Pretty straightforward, just split the end, take out the positive and negative wires, and we'll get those crimped up. ready to attach into the circuit board. Same detail really, cut the bare ends, got the heat shrink tape stuff, and we're going to crimp them with the adapters. That's pretty straightforward really. Just wire up the lights into the ceiling. What we do now is we need to pop in a fuse. So the lights, I think, combined are 1.5 amps, so a 5 amp fuse should be fine. So I'll get one of those now. Five amp orange fuse. All you have to do is just slot these in. Right, so that's fused up. Let's connect the EcoFlow battery and see if we can get it to work. Okay, we've got the battery on. Let's see what happens with this. So I need to actually turn on the DC power on the EcoFlow. There is a button. Ooh. Now we've got a red light on the charger. Flip the DC circuit board switch and we got lights above my head. All working, yes. Happy days. That means I don't need to mess around with the lights in the ceiling. Perfect. Ignore the mess, however, we have 6 lights in the ceiling working. I'm going to leave this there for tonight, tidy this up, get some dinner, and then we'll come back at this in the morning to finish off everything else. Quick pause on the electronics inside the van. I've just had my Starlink Mini delivered. So this is the A4 size Starlink dish. We actually have the full Starlink on the house because we don't get any broadband here, living in the middle of nowhere. So yeah, we've got that up on the roof that I put up. Super fast, never had any issues with it whatsoever. It's never gone down. Yeah, better than your standard like broadband, I think. So I decided to go with the Mini. I'm not going to fix it onto the roof because I want to be able to, a bit like the battery, take it out, use it for other things, i.e. when I go camping, or you can take it backpacking or travelling, whatever you need to do. So it does fit inside a rucksack. It feels pretty light with all the bits inside it anyway. Inside the box, the dish actually has a built-in like router, or router as the Americans call it. Pretty small. That is very small. It's actually smaller than an A4 page, I think. Comes with the wire cable to attach it. It's essentially just a power cable built into it. See the charger type there. The plug, I'm assuming, yeah, that'll fix into the bottom there. So that'll plug directly into my battery, my EcoFlow Delta 2 Max. So that'll power that pretty low watts actually. I think it's 60 watts, it's pretty low. Right, let's jump back into the van. Just had a look at the wiring diagram that I've done. I'll put it up on screen now, just from in Canva. The next appliances that I need to get wired up into the kind of primary fuse box is the fridge and the wall socket, the USB wall socket. Something I noticed, I didn't really leave some of these cables long enough to kind of reach the fuse box. So I'm just going to have to add like 30 centimeters of cable onto a couple of these to make it actually reach the fuse box, which is annoying. The fan one's fine, loads of cable there, and the fridge one, probably add a little bit. I've got the ceiling lights, the wall outlet, the refrigerator cable and the ceiling fan all wired into there. Let's tidy up this mess that I've created down here and work out a way to temporarily attach this to the wall. Reason for it being temporary is I've still got to do more wiring when things like the water heater and the pump arrive, but for now this will do. Let's test out the ceiling fan, just getting it turned on the battery. Battery is on, turning on the DC power. DC power is on. Now flick the cool switch. Ceiling lights have come on. Obviously we've not put an actual wall switch in those yet. Now let's do ceiling fan. Let's turn it on. Let's open it first.